I probably, like you, think, probably it will go up for another few weeks or months. But I've got to wait until the charts actually say, yes, that is true. And then there was a Reuters article in the afternoon that said there's nothing on the table yet. And then the market sold off 100 points after the Reuters article came out.
Can I add some political colour to that?
Please do. Alrighty, welcome to this week's Closing Bell. We have a really big episode coming up for you. We also have a special guest you can see there on the screen. That's our colleague Charlie Ormond, who's going to be telling us about the exciting new project that he's working on. And you'll notice that we're still not recording back in the office. Murray Dawes' lavish lifestyle has taken him up to New South Wales again and back. So next week we'll be back in the studio. But for now, we are talking cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin because, as we know, the share market has been under pressure. A bit of a bounce this week, so a little bit of positive action there. But the big question rolling through the markets now is what is going on with Bitcoin? So that's the first thing we want to know. And then are we going to get another alt season, what they call the alt season, and when the other cryptocurrencies start running? So we'll start with Murray Dawes, who's going to chart the Bitcoin price for us, and then we're going to talk to Charlie about what he's working on and his expertise in the crypto market. So, Murray, to set the scene, we've seen gold go absolutely bananas in the last 6 months or so, absolutely gone crazy, screaming into new highs. Bitcoin hasn't done the same thing. It's fair to say it ran earlier than gold, and gold may be catching up or rebalancing there. But they're two assets that kind of tee off the same dynamics. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, I guess they have had some high correlation at times, in times of stress and whatever, but they're not necessarily one-to-one correlated, are they? My knowledge of Bitcoin, I would say, is so low that thank God we've got Charlie on here because it's not something I trade myself. But I do know that it trades really technically. So, I have noticed over the years that it really does respect all of the levels I look for, the buy and sell zones and the pivots, all that sort of thing. So, a market is a market. Dumb traders do dumb things in every market. So they all seem to respect those levels. So I can definitely chart it. But as far as knowing what's actually going on in Bitcoin, I'm going to have to defer to Charlie, I'm afraid.
Well, I should say, but are you going to show us the charting at all on the Bitcoin price?
Yeah, all right. Well, I can have a quick look. And
the reason I mention it is it has drawn down lately, but it has shown a little bit of life. And it depends how you look at these things. But the recent sell-off, it has been at least relatively stable, which is, Bitcoin is...
Oh, it's trending like anyone's business, Bitcoin. I mean, let's just look at it from the lows. And again, remember, I look at these big waves in Bitcoin in any market, and I look at the collapse of those waves back to, the buy zone of the wave. You can see there, 75 to 87% retracement. So Bitcoin really has respected that even better than most things. It has these massive clear outs that gets everyone bearish. It's all over. And then it turns up again and goes on its next journey to the upside. So this last wave to the upside started in about 2023. So if I just do a really basic, everyone knows this analysis, just looking at the wave structure, what would you say about this wave structure? Would you say it's bullish or bearish? At the moment, the trend to the upside is absolutely clear and incredibly strong because we're not even seeing large retracements of each wave to the previous buy zone. If anything, they're just pulling back to the midpoint. So you've got this massive wave higher, that probably pulled back to the midpoint. You've got this massive wave higher, and you'll see the most recent sell-off did, in fact, pull back to the midpoint. So we've got this massive wave up to over 100,000. That pulled back, you can see about to the midpoint, and now it's taking off again to the upside. So based on the long-term trend, I mean, if you're a bull, you're pretty much taking any chance you can when it does actually have these big corrections and turn back up again, because there is a chance that that's it. And, this could be ready for the next wave higher. And what happens above 110,000? I mean, I don't have a clue. It could go to 150,000. What's it worth? As much money as everyone wants to put in it.
That's when it really starts getting exciting there, Murray.
Yeah. Well, and look, it can do it, can't it? I mean, people trying to say a top, all I can look at is the trend. and say where the risky points are. So for me, looking at it, I'm saying, right, on a weekly basis, it's just had a pullback to the midpoint and of that previous wave, and it's just creating its first weekly buy pivot. So for me, I'm looking at this as a buy on the back foot. So for me, it's sort of mid 80,000s, any sort of sell off to that area from here. I'm probably a buyer, and I'd probably run away if it as a short term trader below 75,000, but then I'd be a really big buyer around that sort of 56,000 to 64,000, which would be the buy zone of that wave. Or if you're a long-term player, you're buying it now, and if it does sell off there, you buy more. Doing the averaging thing, which is probably pretty sensible for people. But for me, looking at Bitcoin, it's like one of the strongest charts out there, and it's actually turning back up. So I'll turn to Charlie to explain why it's turning up and what's going on.
Just before we go to Charlie, Bitcoin's went through its latest halving cycle. Was it last year?
Yeah.
So say that the available supply of Bitcoin is continually going down. So that's another important driver. So you tell us your perspective on Bitcoin.
Yeah, so it's a fixed supply, right? So it's the amount that is slowly unlocked each year, and it's going down and down. So we're down into the single digits now in terms of the amount that's unlocked. So it is a a fixed supply, so it's a really exciting thing. But just looking at that chart and just some comments and thoughts about that, we've been tracking that here for years, and it's really interesting to see that I track other things like the Philadelphia Semiconductors Index and other tech kind of more risk on assets, and Bitcoin has really respected that and been actually quite a great risk signal for the market, like its appetite for risk in a broader sense. So you can see where it's recovering as the trade war and things around Trump kind of start to settle down a little bit, and there's kind of a risk on mood that's coming through the market. So I think Bitcoin is kind of the clearest example. We can see that in the wider market of people with a more of a risk appetite and ready to kind of move forward with that. So it's really interesting that Bitcoin has its own minutiae and news and things that are going on, but more broadly in the market, you can just see it as people who are kind of more ready to take on some risk and seeing there's maybe some greener skies ahead. So it's really exciting.
Could there be a bit of capital controls in China, and really the yuan should probably be falling, if anything? And could there be money that the only way they can really get money out, I guess, is Bitcoin's a pretty good option if you want to transfer out of yuan. Could that be causing buying?
That could be causing some buying. It's really hard to say with that because China goes through periods of capital controls and restricting people putting into Bitcoin, but ultimately you can't restrict Bitcoin. That's what's one of the great things about it. So it's hard to say how much of it is going in there, but I would say that there is probably some buying in there. The largest market we obviously look at, if you just look at the trading behavior of Bitcoin to the US open markets, like when people are awake there, a lot of the trading is coming out of there, and it's a lot of money and a lot of capital flowing through that. But there's obviously huge international players. There's always talks about who's controlling the market and who's doing this and that with everything. Gold is, in particular, there was a huge narrative about China and its influence on gold last year. That's kind of receded a little bit. So I would say that there is some heavy buying coming out of China. But at this point, I think it's more of just about the broader feeling from the market that, hey, there's a huge opportunity here with Trump, with deregulation, with everything that's happening in crypto, and then it is a really risk-on moment now.
What about the talk about the thematic with gold lately has been the US deficits and the unsustainability of their federal debt? Surely that Bitcoin plays into that narrative as well in some way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is that feeling of like, well, we don't know, how they're going to control this debt situation. Is Doge actually cutting enough to actually scale back that huge kind of growing, $1 trillion interest payment deficit they've got going at the moment? And so this kind of definancialization, or moving away from the traditional financial structures is also a thing that has always motivated Bitcoin buyers, I think. But ultimately, most people would see it as a speculative thing on the side rather than their kind of core, putting all your money in Bitcoin. Depends on where you sit in that camp. And so it always has more responded to the idea of it being a speculative asset, and the risk on, risk off is a clearer sign from that. But I think, the inexorable rise of Bitcoin over these years, back in 2017 when I first got into Bitcoin, I didn't even imagine it would be at these points. I didn't have that vision at that side. I was thinking, wow, 30 grand would be great. And here we are now, touching $100,000 US. So that's absolutely insane. Can it go higher from here? I certainly think it is. I think it's on that path where people aren't trusting these large governments with their control over the capital, that these systems are splitting, and I think there's only up for Bitcoin from here.
Well, just one thing for me, I down in that down phase in 2023, I bought for my self-managed super fund, and the best thing I ever did was not pay any attention to it after that, because it's done really well since. But I'm sure if I'd watched it closely, I would have talked myself out of it or got out of it. So it's been good for me so far.
Yeah, I've certainly had a similar experience. Sorry, just getting off with the altcoins like that. Similar people where they jump into these coins, they wash them like a hawk, they overtrade them, they end up shaking themselves out of positions. I've had the same thing where I've set a large kind of cohort of positions along these altcoins, forgot about it, and then come back many years later and been very happy with the results.
So let's talk about those altcoins. Bitcoin is sort of obviously the leading network of crypto. Historically, or at least last time I tuned in, I don't follow the altcoins much. Bitcoin leads the charge, and then there's sort of a shift, and the traders go to the other ones. Is that happening at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's always what we call the different seasons or cycles with this, where Bitcoin will lead the wave, as you'd see it, and then as that kind of starts to capitulate, people will start moving further down the chain into the smaller coins to try and find those excess gains. This has been a bit of a stranger cycle in terms of both its length, but also where the money is flowing. So, for example, Ethereum, which has been the number 2 coin for almost the entirety of the crypto market, has really struggled in this last cycle, right? It still has tons of developers and a lot of interest, but its price has been really, really down comparative to the other ones. For people that are interested to try and track where these cycles are, there's a thing you can search for, which is called Bitcoin dominance, right? So it's the percentage of the total market of crypto, which is actually Bitcoin. And the percentage of that really determines where you can tell where the market is and where that things are moving. And there are clear signs that altcoins are now starting to come back into favor, and the next kind of altcoin cycle is ready to take off again.
Well, I suppose the dynamic there is a little bit like small caps, where in the share market where you go, look, you can buy BHP, but the odds of it going up 50% aren't very high anytime soon. As Bitcoin gets bigger, I guess the gains, in theory, get harder. But with some of the smaller ones, you can go back. I remember in 2017 when some of the gains were absolutely astronomical. So it's interesting to see. All right, well, tell us about what's happening with James Altucher and yourself with what you're doing with your latest project.
Yeah, so we have a really exciting new project coming out and should be launching later today, in fact. So what we are looking through with that is essentially it's all the states, right? The major changes that we're seeing is coming from the political shifts from Biden's era to Trump's, where we had in Biden's era a huge hostile SEC with a bunch of regulations that were tapping down on a lot of these smaller coins, Bitcoin as well, but mainly the other altcoins which were involved in utilities of different things. So what are those utilities? There's things like managing different financial tools, like fintech options, tokenization of various assets, whether that be real estate or even paintings or physical infrastructure. All of those different assets can now be tokenized in this new changing environment. So essentially, under Trump, he's brought in a crypto czar, a bunch of very pro-crypto SEC individuals, and they've laid out a pretty clear plan. They've hinted at it along the way. I mean, the biggest hint we saw was obviously before Trump was inaugurated, he launched his own crypto coin. So it just shows you how pro he is. I mean, he was the first US president to make a public Bitcoin purchase, right? He did that within the first 30 days of his presidency. So there is a clear sign from everywhere that this is a very pro-crypto federal government. And so with that, we're looking around to say, okay, where are the opportunities that we can find with that? And we've identified a specific asset class within the crypto sphere that we think has huge potential moving forward, where we look into tokenizing all these real world assets that are around here. So with James at the helm, he's got all these amazing ideas and great insights and analysts over in the US. He's got an ear to the ground when it comes to the regulators. So we're taking all of that information and we're putting it through that Australian lens and offering it to our readers here. So it's a really exciting time. If anyone is even a little bit interested in crypto, as we've seen from the markets, it's a risk-on environment. It's a great time to throw a speculative amount in this direction.
Well, I got to say, I remember doing a chat with James Altucher in Baltimore, USA, and this was back in 2018. I think it was. Bitcoin was probably maybe 15k Aussie, not even that. I can't remember now. And now it's nearly 150. Anyway, James is publicly very vocal about the upside of Bitcoin, and it's been a wild ride, but he's certainly been bang on about that. So it's exciting to see where this goes. And as you say, Trump is very pro deregulation in this sector, and you've got advocates. Is it Michael Saylor who's the buying up half the Bitcoin supply or whatever it is?
Yeah, through MicroStrategy. It's a very interesting strategy he's got going there, but it's certainly a big buyer that they've got going. But there are other players coming into it. I mean, it's not just Michael Saylor. He was kind of the stalwart through all of those bear markets that we've seen, where he's just constantly buying, constantly acquiring more Bitcoin. But now we're seeing players like JP Morgan, UBS, BlackRock, these the largest institutional players in the world. You know, HSBC, the largest bank in Hong Kong. All of these players, Visa, MasterCard, I can go on, like these major institutional players are entering the space and saying, hey, where are these opportunities? How can we get a part of this? So this is the next wave that we see within crypto, which is kind of, you could see it as the institutionalization of crypto as these major players start taking their slice of the pie. And so it's a great opportunity for people that want to be like, hey, I want my slice as well.
I know Catherine, my mate, Catherine Gresham, I should say, who follows the real estate market. She often talks about this because real estate is a classic example of something that could be tokenized, and people could buy, much smaller shares of they may not be able to afford our property, but a sort of a token of 1 or 2% of, or 3% or whatever it is of, just the potential is staggering for how many assets this could go in.
We're seeing it through wine. We're seeing it in so that you can buy a fraction of a Monet if you want, these paintings. There are so many assets that can be tokenized, and it allows that kind of fractionalized split investment. So you can have, as you say, a fraction of a Rembrandt or an amazing asset that's underlying that you'd have no chance of affording, and treat it like another speculative stock. So it's a really interesting space.
That's exactly what the share market is, right? You take a company and you split it into, 50 million shares or whatever it is.
Yeah. So in the same way, if you have the faith that a Monet is going to be worth more in the future, if you have a faith that your favorite artist has something that is worth something to people in the future, it's a fantastic way to be able to sell that on a secondary market.
All right, so we'll put the link into the priority list for what you're doing with James Altucher. You can click on that if you're interested. And of course, crypto is totally global. It's not like you are hostage to what's going on in the US or China or anything like that. That's the other thing about it, and it's trading constantly, so it's super intriguing. So if you're interested, definitely sign up to that. Murray, just to finish up for our regular guys looking at the market, we have seen the general market bounce this week. I mean, is this, you're still concerned that we're going to get another drawdown and maybe retest that low, and that this is kind of that rally that you kind of tabled that could go on for a little bit, just sort of suck everybody in, get them comfortable again, and maybe we go down again? Or what's your latest thoughts?
Oh, well, I can quickly to cover off what's going on in the S&P. I did just write about it yesterday, so it should be here, and I can give you a quick sense of it. So here we have S&P 500 on the weekly chart, and look, I've got really no view. All I'm looking at is what is the current state of the market, and I have certain rules that let me know when I'm allowed to start getting bullish and when I should be a bit wary. So next week everything could be bullish for sure, because we've had quite a strong week this week. So I'm more than happy for it to finish next week and create all the buy signals I need to see. But at the moment, there's just none of that on offer when I look at the chart. So that's why I'm remaining wary. So what I'm showing you here is the weekly chart on the S&P 500, and you've got the 10-week exponential moving average there. That's that bright sort of orange line, and then the 20-week simple moving average. So just based on that, simply you can see that the shift in the trend. We've had an incredibly wild sell-off, so the volatility has been huge. But while the trend is in place, and this is in these weekly trends, while prices remain below that 10-week exponential moving average and are trending, the market is trending strongly. I mean, just got to be wary that it could continue. So if we're looking here, there's your 10-week moving average. Prices are still well below that 10-week moving average. So this downtrend could still be in the middle of what it's doing. Also, we look at the whole range of the correction. The midpoint, obviously, the point of control, that's that line there. So you can see that the price action just of last night actually went to retest that point of control and sold off 100 points. So from that point of view, prices remain below the point of control of the whole correction. They remain below the 10-week moving average. We haven't seen any weekly buy pivot, which is what I'd need to see to say that we could be turning around. That's not to say next week it's not going to happen. It's just that right where we are now, despite the fact we saw a 5% move to the upside during the week, the structure of it is saying that there could be more downside. So the weekly trends are all the trends are still down. It's still below the point of control. There's no weekly buy pivot. So basically, my model doesn't allow me to get bullish yet. And,
Yeah.
Right.
and it may all happen next week, in which case that's fine. But right now, there's still risk of more downside.
Can I add some political color to that?
Please do.
I feel like, obviously much of this market is pivoting around Trump and whatever Trump thinks. So it's very much kind of tracking the man to track the market at this moment. I think what we've seen in the last kind of week's price action has been almost a relief rally on the fact that as they say, the Trump put is back, right? His usual, from what defined his first term, this idea that he really deeply cared about the stock market performance because it was kind of embedded within his feeling of success, right? So if the market's doing well, he would tweet about it, he would talk about it. We saw the part of this large drop, there was this feeling that he's going to do these tariffs no matter what. It's good for the largest system, that he really is going to ignore the pain of those markets and look for a longer term fixing of the system. I think what we've seen in the last few days is a real feeling that the Trump put is back, right? He is deeply concerned about the markets. He's tweeted about it multiple times or on Truth Social, whatever the Truth Social version of tweeting is called. He's really been talking about it. The emphasis on the idea that the tariffs are not going to be 140% for China, right? He said they're not going to be zero, but they're going to be nowhere near 140%. Markets love that. The fact that he said, I'm not going to fire Powell, even after many tweets about saying how incompetent he was and how he was going to cut too late. So there's been a lot of feelings where someone has either gotten to his ear or he's started to really start caring about the structure of the stock market. And so he's been cowed, in a sense, to kind of scale back a lot of his talks, tough talk around tariffs and things like that. So looking ahead, there could be further, obviously, trade wars with many countries and many different discussions going on. I think there's something like 18 proposals on the table right now from different countries. So who knows where that can go. We'll probably continue snaking up and down as that continues to unfold. But there might be this sign from this latest move is almost a relief rally on the feeling that maybe he is starting to rein it in a little bit.
But nothing's actually happened.
But nothing's actually happened. That's the crazy thing.
There was two articles that came out yesterday. There was a Wall Street Journal article in the morning that he was about to cut all the tariffs. And then there was a Reuters article in the afternoon that said there's nothing on the table yet. And then the market sold off 100 points after the Reuters article came out. So we're in the middle of this massively volatile phase. As you say, it's news-driven. It's all about Trump, what he comes up with, whether he gets nervous or not. He's also got to deal with China and try to come out of it looking okay and not like he's backing down. So he's not offering China a blanket cut without them also offering the same thing. So he's still got to do a lot of wheeling and dealing. So really, every day we could wake up with something new coming out and the market down 5% the next day, and then everyone will be bearish. So we're just in the middle of a very volatile phase, and that's why I just need, for me, my model telling me, yes, it is actually looking bullish. I probably, like you, think, probably it will go up for another few weeks or months. But I've got to wait until the charts actually say, yes, that is true, rather than whatever is going on in my head.
Fair enough. All right, well, we'll leave it there. Thanks, Charlie, for coming on, and we'll look forward to tracking how you go. Murray, I'll see you next week, and if you're watching, and you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and a like, and always you're welcome to drop a comment in or request a chart for Murray to take a look at. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, cheers.